Hi, everybody. I am Andra Annette, and welcome to this week's session of Building Community. So today I have a very special guest with me, Angela Legh. For the first 54 years of her life, she was bullied, first by her father and then by the man that she married. So it left her questioning her life, especially after a disastrous wildfire in California. So she did start writing children's books. I believe it's the Bella Santini Chronicles, correct?
That's correct.
And this really helps teach children how to deal and express their emotions in a better way. So please help me welcome Angela Legh.
Hello.
Hello, hello, hello. So I have so many questions flooding my mind
Okay.
because I can't imagine. I mean, I've been in an abusive marriage, but I can't imagine when we expect to be able to be loved and nurtured, to be experiencing something like being bullied by our parent and then our spouse. Can you
Yeah,
tell me what that was like for you so the audience can have a better understanding of what you were
sure.
going through?
Yeah. My father was an alcoholic, and if we had to quantify it, I would say raging alcoholic because he just got so angry when he was drunk. And so during my childhood, I had to learn really how to hide so that I wouldn't be attacked by him. And um, my mother, she had to work to support the family because he wasn't. And so it was just us kids left with dad, and um he would occasionally, not occasionally, he would often get drunk, and often he would attack us. And you know it wasn't necessarily physical, it was emotional. And so what I learned from a very young age was not to value myself. I was told that I was worthless. And that when you're a child, you believe that your parent is the authority, that they know what they're talking about, so you believe what they say. Part of what I do now is help people to get over things like that, because when we look at it through our adult eyes and we see, this drunken, enraged man screaming at a little girl, we can say, wow, well, it's not about her, it's about him. And we can rethink how that is. And that helps us to undo those rules of living that we made as children about who we are or how we are in the world, based on what our parents told us.
Well, the other thing too is, I'm always talking about unmet needs, right? So I come from a long line of alcoholics. So I am that Irish background and that Italian background.
Me too.
So I totally get that. But we do take on those stories they tell us, and we do hold on to them, and they do resurface until we can learn to let them go and rewire ourselves
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that those aren't our patterns, because things that people say to us throughout our lives will trigger certain things that people say, or maybe a tone in their voice will bring us back to that day when we were a frightened child. So
Yeah.
I totally understand that, but it's not as easy as people think it is, because I write books too, and I find people like, why do you keep writing all these books? And I find that, and even though they're all about different things, some are children, some are adult, that a little bit more of that child heals
Mm-hmm.
when I express it in through different genres, or
Yep.
um just letting that part of me go because, like, you were told you weren't worth anything. I was told that the things I wanted to do, like writing, I was told I was worthless too, but um, the things I wanted to do didn't have any real value.
Mm, yeah. It is it is something that can truly stay with someone all of their life if they don't if they don't know what tools to use to move the energy. Um, some of my research that I've done on emotions is based on the work of Dr. Alice Miller, and she studied children from a young age up into their adulthood, so longitudinal studies. She studied the effects of neglectful and harmful parenting. And she came out with the idea that children cannot express what's happening to them about what's happening to them because, you can't just say, "Hey, dad, I don't like how you talk to me," when you're a child. So, what happens is children repress those emotions, and those emotions are energy. They stay with us, they don't leave, and they either go inward or they go outward. So, if they go outward, when you're triggered by someone's behavior, you attack them. And we all have met people like that in our
Yeah.
life that
Hmm.
have that kind of behavior. The other way is inward. And this could be where you end up blaming yourself. You could do self harming. You could do alcoholism or drug abuse, which is a self harming way of dealing with emotions. And so the emotions never like get stuffed down and stay there. They're always going to come up. And either we're going to express them outward onto others or inward onto ourselves.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. But from an outside point of view, let's say I didn't experience this, and I think a lot of children in our times, because I think we're pretty close in age, during our time growing up,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't spare the rod.
Right.
They were um, more verbal to say what they wanted to say, and as a child, to hear that you didn't have any value, how did you take that and turn it into something powerful?
Well, it took me more than 54 years to do that because the first thing that happened was I ended up marrying a man who was also emotionally abused as a child. And what he learned, so from my father, I learned um, one of the takeaway lessons was that anger is something I could never use on anyone because I don't want to be like him. My former husband learned that anger got you what you want. And so, even though we had the same circumstance, we came to two different um, ways of looking at it. And so, with him, whoever yelled loudest wins. And in our marriage, I lost all the time. So, because I would not allow myself to get angry, I would not admit ever that I got angry. I was in such denial of my own anger. Um, and that is a part of the repressive behavior that I adopted as a child.
Would you say that because of circumstances that we gravitate towards people with similar pasts and
Yeah.
behaviors?
Mm-hmm. I
Because
think it's kind of a pattern repeat. I thought I was marrying a man who didn't drink, so I thought I was doing good. But the behavior that I experienced was very similar to how my father treated me. And it wasn't all the time. There were good times in the marriage and bad times in the marriage. Um, but the way I look at it now is that the toxic behavior from him and from me, from my repression of anger, um, it was a very toxic relationship.
I I would say so. But there's an old saying, two sickies don't make a wellie. So you both came from very um altered backgrounds, I want to say. Maybe a little dysfunctional. Not that either one of
Very
you as
dysfunctional.
children had the opportunity to have a say in what kind of childhood you were
Exactly.
raised in, you know. And I mean, I certainly had a very dysfunctional childhood, and I asked you the question I asked you because I found that because my home life wasn't a typical, leave it to Beaver type of household,
No,
that I didn't feel comfortable around people that had good homes. I
absolutely. That's
I
one of the outcomes of that kind of childhood abuse is that you you don't feel worthy of receiving that level of love. So you look for a kind of love that matches what you had before.
Yeah. So
And
I
that,
mean, I
yeah.
gravitated towards the people that had similar home life like me, single parent homes, maybe dysfunctional in a, if not in the same way, but in some way like mine. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until I realized that those patterns, I would move, Angela, of course, thinking that I was somehow getting away from those things, but I brought myself with me everywhere I went.
Time.
And I saw that those patterns just kept repeating themselves until I really started doing that inner work. And I carried it a really long time, like yourself. And I think that there's because you are writing these stories and you are speaking out, and I'm honest about my path, and there's
Mhm.
other women out there actually having these conversations. It allows people to see the dysfunction and that they're not alone, and it gives them the courage and maybe the incentive to go for help earlier, not to carry it with them throughout their life.
Absolutely. And a lot of my work is with parents to help them see how their behavior affects kids and the different kinds of parenting. You referred earlier to the kind of disciplinarian parenting that is very damaging for raising kids, and the spare the rod, spoil the child ideal that was so prevalent when we were children, um, is is definitely one of the worst ways to parent.
Yeah, it is. But I think that verbal abuse or neglect in other ways, I'm a nurse by trade, right? So we are mandated reporters, and we do
Oh
see
yeah,
these type of situations, but being poor is not neglectful. So if someone doesn't have the finances to get certain things for the children, that's very different than um so what I want to say, and I'm not doing a very good job of it, is that there are parents, there are parents that are home, but they're never present. And
yes,
I think, you
and that's
know,
a form of neglect. Absolutely.
yes. And I absolutely think that that hurts a child because one of those needs aren't being met. They might have
Mhm.
the shelter and the food, the basic things, but they might not feel that love and belonging when they come running home. Mommy, guess what happened in school today? And mommy's busy, she's on the phone, where
Mhm.
daddy couldn't be bothered. He's with his buddies, having a beer, watching a show, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's very there's so many different forms of this, and I think every parent wants to really believe that they're doing a good job. But unfortunately, even the times that we grew up, I don't think our all of our parents meant to hurt us. But I think that
Oh,
they were coming from those generational stories and those childhoods that were similar. And abuse negates abuse. So if you
exactly.
yeah, if you do not break that cycle, then you will continue that cycle in your own parenting. So it's very important to see that. God bless you.
Thank
It's
you.
it's very important for people to see that it even though it's so important to love and honor yourself first, to fill your own cup first,
Oh,
that
very.
but not taking care of yourself, it is going to impact everything in your exterior world, right? And
Absolutely.
yeah, and a lot
Yeah.
of people say, well, it's my problem and I'll deal with it when I'm ready, but then the children come along and that pattern just keeps
Keeps
happening.
going.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to unpack on what you just said. The there's generational trauma from parenting that is handed down. Um, Most often, people will do one of two things when they have kids. They will either say, like me, I can't be like my father. I will not behave like him. And so my father was very much the disciplinarian um, kind of energy. And so I ended up being on the permissive side of parenting because there was no way I was going to treat my kids that way. Um, other other people will just default to the kind of parenting they experience. Well, I turned out okay, and my dad was disciplinarian, so I should be disciplinarian. Um, those ideas are now really unmasked by psychology because the work of Dr. Alice Miller and others really show that there are four types of parenting. There's the authoritarian, which is the disciplinarian. There's the permissive. There's the neglectful. And then there's the authoritative. And the authoritative style of parenting is the one that brings about the best results in raising kids. And my website goes deeply into these different styles of parenting. There's even a quiz on the website that people can take to figure out, okay, well, I'm not sure which style I am. Let me see. And then there's a downloadable that talks about, you know, there can be pros and cons to every parenting style. And when you know what parenting style to use for the kind of kid you have and for the circumstances, then you can choose and respond in a way that best serves the child. So, for instance, when you have a toddler and he runs out into the street, like my son did when he was 3 years old, I chose the disciplinarian style, grab his arm, grab him back, pop him on the butt and say, you can't do this. It's not good. And I had an immediate reaction because of my fear over whether he was going to get hit by that car that was coming down the street or, um, you know, what kind of mom am I being if I let my little kid run into the street? And that kind of reaction in a situation where there's danger to the child, having a disciplinarian approach is actually can be very effective. What you don't want to do is have all of your parenting be disciplinarian because that will harm your child in the long run.
So it's really a matter of adapting the
Yeah,
styles because all of these styles that you're talking about, they're the same in leadership. So, um, they're But I think that it's not easy being a parent, and it's certainly
Oh,
not easy
no.
being a child today. And nobody gives you a manual when you leave with this new little fresh baby. And here, you do your best. But I think what I'd really like people to know from this experience is that what we say to our children doesn't, sometimes we say things when we're angry,
Mhm.
you know, and we think that, sorry somehow puts that away, but there's things you just can't put away. So we do have to be mindful with the emotional status of our children. We do have to realize that this may have a long-term impact on them and do the best you can. And if you
Yeah.
feel like there's a disconnect in some way or that your parenting skills are lacking, for a better word, then you really should get that help. And I think that a lot of times it is those generational stories that are passed down and those
Oh, yes.
learned behaviors. I don't think that someone chooses just to be heavy-handed with their children. That's something that's witnessed or experienced in their past. These are learned behaviors that are passed down. Um,
Absolutely. And what I tell parents is it's not your fault. You know, your parents did this. They probably learned it from their parents, who probably learned it from their parents, and it could probably go way back beyond the Victorian age. And so it's like now we're in a modern age and we have this information at our fingertips. We can Google it, we can get the knowledge. Our parents didn't have that. And so it's not your fault if you react in a way to your child's behavior, but you do have access to information now, and you can take the test on my website and you can um, basically download the downloadable that tells you what good times are, when it's good to use one type of parenting over the other. And you can raise emotionally resilient children.
I think that's so important today. You know, we have so much more than we did so many years ago.
We
And I
do.
don't really think there's an excuse for not getting the help today that's out there
Mm-hmm.
to explore those avenues, especially with everything that's out there. So if you're really not sure, but also for the parent, so that some people just opt not to have children, right?
Right.
they
Right.
I'll never be like that, and they're afraid to have children because of those generational
The way
things.
they
they
were.
they are afraid that they may be that person, right? So
I think that that is a primary fear of a new parent
yeah.
is like, I don't really know how to do this, how to not be the way that hurt me when my parents did it. And so they think they will do the same thing to their kids, but mostly I would say that the people who have that kind of concern will reach out for help. They'll get information, they'll research how to deal with this situation. So if they're having that thought, that means there's someone who cares, someone who wants to do it right. And so they'll probably end up doing it right.
And getting that help and seeking that help,
Yeah,
right? So I'm encouraged by that, um, because I do see the statistics that are happening and they're not good. um, so statistically, we're not doing such a great job as parents, but I do want to offer, can you tell them your website so that they can
absolutely.
find you to get that help if they need it?
Yeah, my website is Angela, Angela, Lee, Legh.com. It's like Lee, Leigh, but there's no I. So yeah.
But that's good. I think it's important for them to have people to. So when you were going through this, so you have children of your own, yes?
Do, yeah.
So when you were experiencing these things, were there support groups or anything that you found especially helpful during that time that we can share with the audience?
You know, my kids were grown up by the time the fire destroyed our house. And so I I have to look back on raising my kids and say, boy, did I fail them when it comes to emotions, because what I taught them was to repress anger, because that's what I was doing. I was modeling repression of anger. And that's all I knew at the time. So I can't beat myself up for not being a better parent to them because I didn't have the tools I now have. What I did learn is really through facing my own shadows and looking at, okay, when did I first feel this way? When I triggered by the behavior of someone. Okay, can I think back to when I first felt that way? And in doing that, I can most likely it led back to my father and his behavior. So I can do what I call rewriting the narrative, put myself into that picture, my adult self. And the adult self can pick up the child me and tell me the truth that the adult sees in the situation. So if it was your father yelling at you while drunk and you stepped into that picture, you would tell the little you that he's projecting his internal pain onto you, the child. This is nothing about you, the child. It's all about him and who he is in this moment. And understanding that the Talmud says we do not see the world as it is, we see it as we are. So my father saw the world as he was. And anything that came out of his mouth was how he saw the world.
A reflection of himself. Yes, we
Yeah.
mirror our own image. That's why it's important to have a really good self-image, right? Because you want to be mirroring good stuff, right? So
Yeah.
I'm very into this stuff. I practice a lot of this in my own life because I was emotionally stunted for a long time, you know,
Right.
and I
And
did have poor
people don't.
coping mechanisms because of it, you know. Um,
Absolutely. I mean, what parent teaches a child coping mechanisms?
Nobody, but it wasn't even just about coping. It was about um trust. Like I didn't have trust
Mm-hmm. I didn't
when
trust
I was
men
young.
at all.
I didn't trust anybody, not just men. I didn't I didn't trust anyone because
Oh,
of
I'm
course
sorry.
my mother was a single parent, you know, but I just didn't trust anyone. And so it was very hard for me to get close to people growing up. And then there was that thing my mother always said, what happens in this house stays in this house. So I always thought what
Oh,
happens in that house was very bad and I wasn't allowed to share it. So there
mm.
was a certain amount of shame came with that and
Oh,
a
yes.
certain amount of feeling like I had to be untrue to people that were in my circle. Hey, Andra, what did you
Yeah.
do? Well, nothing, even if there was something going on, because I wasn't allowed to share honestly, right? So to me,
Right.
kind of lying by omission. So that does impact, and I don't think that people realize the impacts those kind of things have on children, even those blatant words, money doesn't grow on trees. People grow up,
Right.
struggling to find money. and all kinds of other stuff. And I think if our parents knew today the impact that those things had on us, I think they would have tried to seek help for them to
I
get rid of
think you're
it.
right. They just didn't know. And they did what their parents did, who did what their parents did. And it's really the generational trauma that's associated with repression of emotions is so huge. The alcoholism of the Irish people is definitely related to the repression of emotion. When I lived in England, I couldn't believe how people would not allow their emotions to express. I couldn't believe it. I did a meditation, a guided meditation in England. And when I said, think back to when you were a child and when you were running through the fields or riding your bike and you felt so free and you felt just wonderful. You were having such a good, happy time with your friends. And some guy sat up and he said, how do I feel? And I thought, oh my goodness. This is
He never felt that.
because the keep calm, carry on, the we don't talk about that kind of energy is very strong in England.
I think it's very strong globally.
Yeah,
I think that we've become very good at wearing different masks, but
it's very much a mask. Yes,
yeah, but I think so many people have suffered some kind of trauma or unmet need because I think that any unmet need growing up, if you know you go through the stages of development with any psychosocial or psychologist, these do experience the next stage. They do affect the next stage of development. So it will, someone who doesn't feel, nourished or loved and belonging, or they felt not like their parents weren't tapping into them. Like you have those kids like in the oral phase, if we're talking about Freud, right? That they might become those thumb suckers, right? Because they're trying to appease themselves because they're not feeling the need being met at that stage of that development, because a lot of those go through different stages. And when they're not met, people replace those with other things because that becomes their way of coping, right?
absolutely. And we all know of people who maybe they grew up very poor and were denied the ability to use money, or maybe they didn't have enough food, or maybe they didn't have enough shoes, whatever, and they pushed themselves to be rich because they're running away from what they had as a child.
Or lack of what they had.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're yeah.
Yeah, I see that. Like, and I was the only one in my family that went to college, right?
Mhm.
Because I did not want to be that woman that had to work all those hours every day and not be with her children, right? So I definitely see how the patterns affected my life, and I know it's out there affecting a lot of people. So I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing. I think
Oh, thank you.
you're going to be helping so many people. So let's read a little bit from your story today.
Okay, let me pull it. So this is let me see if I can make it. Bella Santini in the Land of Everlasting Change. It's the first book of my series, which is written for middle grade, but people in their 40s or 50s like it too.
Okay.
Um, so in this chapter, Bella, the protagonist, is on a she's has to fulfill a trial. So she's given an assignment and has to get this thing and come back with it. Um, Shabona is her best friend in the Fey land. So Shabona said, I believe everything always works towards our best interests. The energies and forces in this reality help us achieve our goals when our goals are aligned for the greater good of all. Our job is to trust the process and move forward with faith. You, my friend, are strong and capable. While a bit selfish, your goal is also something that can be good for the kingdom. You can and will finish this task today. Bella looked at her friend, smiling at her with such confidence and such love. Confidence that Bella did not feel. However, Shabona's words did ring true, and truth was an essential factor in every endeavor. Bella understood that she needed to trust herself. Her job today would be to trust the process and move forward. Smiling, Bella hugged her friend. Thank you, Shabona. That's just what I needed to hear, and I'm going to start this quest. I will see you at the end of the day. Bella flew off to her room where she could sit in stillness for a moment, breathing deeply, while feeling the energy of her friends supporting her. Meditation and silence gave her a feeling of peace and inner strength. Feeling prepared, Bella left her room and flew to the library. And I'm going to skip ahead. So in this next section, Bella and Torvieto. Torvieto is a gargoyle that was animated by magic. Bella kissed his cheek and he became alive. So Torvieto dove down through the trees. He was searching for a specific tree, one that had cracked nearly in two by lightning 1,000 years ago. But still, the tree stood tall and mighty, a living example of strength through adversity. Barbietto flew lower and lower, searching for that tree, and the entrance point would allow them to access the fabled object, the chalice of Chiani. Flying faster, he entered the crack between two parts of the tree at a precise angle of 32.2 degrees. He recalled that to do so at any other angle would not work. The magic activated, Torvieto and Bello were hurled up a tunnel that angled up and away from the split tree. Colors mixed and melded on the edge of the tunnel, creating a kaleidoscope of ever-changing designs. The tunnel seemed to flex in a way that kept their forward progress. After many minutes, they shot out of the tunnel into the void. Inky blackness surrounded them, so deep it seemed that light was forever banned. Bella could not see Torvieto, nor could she see even any part of herself. They were cloaked in the pure absence of light, a darkness that was so pervasive, Bella thought she might have gone blind. Where are we? We're in an alternate world, a parallel reality known as Emovia, which is only accessible through the portal within that tree. The chalice was hidden in this dark world by a rebel trying to diminish the Sealy court's power. I know this because during my time as a sentinel attached to the roof, I heard secret conversations. How will we find it? It's so dark here. Is that enough? Do I need to read more?
No, that's great. I just like people to get an idea. You could actually come back on another show and actually share more if you like.
Okay.
Because
What I can say is
we
that,
have this. I'm sorry.
oh, I was just going to say that as that chapter goes on, the people of Emovia are emotions, and they are emotions run into those two characters as they're going through this alternate reality. and they have to figure out how to cope with that emotion, get through that emotion. And so the chapter actually includes different tools for processing emotions.
I love that.
Yeah.
So where can they find these books?
Well, they're on Amazon.
Well, it's great. It looked like a hefty book too.
Well,
Yeah. So
it's a chapter book for children. Yeah.
yeah, but I think it's great what you're doing. I love listening to these type stories. So I think it's okay for people in their 50s too.
I actually
I'm a
have
big
had,
little kid.
yeah, I've received reviews from people in their 80s who like, oh, it reminded me of my childhood. I love that book.
It
So,
sounds really
yeah.
fascinating. It really does. And I actually have a book club group, so I might suggest this book for them. So they can find it on Amazon. And what's the name
Mhm.
of the book again? Just so,
Bella Santini in the Land of Everlasting Change.
okay. So you said it's a series, so there are several.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
there's 3 published right now, and each book gives a little bit more information about emotions and how to deal with adverse circumstances.
I think that's great. I love what you're out there doing. So if you could leave the audience with something that you've learned from this transition, because you have transitioned, that you think that would help them the most, what would that be?
Mm. So in the first book of Bella, I have a tool that allows you to experience a difficult emotion without falling into the rabbit hole of pain associated with that emotion. And I'll explain a little bit about the science behind why it works. It's a feeling in our body lasts 120 seconds, thereabouts, maybe 2 minutes, and then it dissipates. Unless our mind focuses on the circumstances, it's not fair. I don't like what he did to me. I hate this. I don't want to feel this way. Any of that resistance thought pattern will make the emotion last longer. So, the reason this tool works is because you disconnect your mind from those thought loops that keep you in the emotion. All you do is focus your attention on the feeling, all of your attention. Where is it in my body? What color is it? Is it a ball of pain? Is it a sharp stick of pain? How does it feel? Where is it? Um, you explore this feeling and then you give yourself permission to feel it. The exploration of the feeling disconnects your mind from the circumstance because you put all of your attention on the feeling. I have had feedback from people who kind of didn't believe that that is an effective tool, focused attention on the feeling. I have had feedback from a guy who lost his best friend to suicide. Um, it was the day before the podcast that I was on in Australia. And during the podcast, I gave the tool. And a month later, he told me that that tool was what got him through the day because he didn't know how he was going to deal with how he was feeling. And the tool helped him.
It sounds like a great tool, and I think that's a great thing to have in our toolbox. I really do. I'm even
Yeah.
gonna try it myself.
Okay.
Yes, yes, I am. So I want to thank you for coming in and spending time with us today. I want to thank the audience for listening, and please help me thank our fabulous guest, Angela Legh. And you can find her at angelalegh.com. Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. And her books are on Amazon. So great reads. Have a good night, guys.